My name is Wawel and I'm 43 years old. I actually thought of becoming a priest before, and I went to a retreat given by a very wise Jesuit. And he told me that if you want to have a kid, if you want to have a wife, if you want to have children, if you want to have a family, go for it. Because that's most likely what God wants. I first met my wife at the office. When I first met Mila at the office, kasi she was very, she was very pretty, very striking, the way she appeared. Eh ako, parang I didn't want to show na because everybody else thought she was pretty, but I didn't want to show that I was attracted to her that way. And parang to me, I found it difficult admitting that, that she was very pretty. But what really got me attracted and interested was when the entire division went out as a group. And when we did, we went to this bar that was quite noisy. And then what I noticed is that in the midst of all that noise, she spoke to the person in front of her using sign language. And I was, I became very curious how she knew sign. I asked her. And she said that she had a niece who was deaf-mute. Because she wanted to reach out to her niece, she had learned how to sign. So I was very impressed, the fact na she knew how to sign. And I said, wow, it's a pretty girl with a big heart. We became very close as friends, no? Parang I didn't start out parang courting her from the get-go. We knew each other for about 4 years before we finally decided to get married. Mary's life was very smooth, trouble-free. Rough spots, I think, were addressed, were ironed out, were discussed. During those 10 months, wala kaming pinag-awayan. No big arguments. Walang tampuhan. She got pregnant after our honeymoon, and then after 10 months, she gave birth to our daughter, to our first child. So we got married January 2, 1996, and then she gave birth October 20. A few minutes after she gave birth, she had an amniotic fluid embolism. At the time it happened, they didn't know what it was, but essentially what happened was she had a seizure. She went into arrest. And she was bleeding profusely. The hospital went into code blue. Code blue means a patient has died. Code blue means they try to revive a patient who is essentially clinically dead. They resuscitated her. So once she started breathing, they had to look for the source of bleeding. They stopped it, and she fell into a coma. The neurologist took tests, and it was confirmed that her brain activity was very low. So after 2 weeks, she was still in a coma. And that's when the neurologist told me that most likely she will be in a persistent vegetative state all the rest of her life. He also explained to me that because she is young, she will also most likely live as long as probably her mom. That I'll have to take care of her for that long. At that time, her mom was 70. So I said, oh my, parang the prospect of her living until 70 years old and in a persistent vegetative state, syempre I couldn't deal with it. I didn't know how I could possibly take care of her as a vegetable. On the 3rd week of her coma, I noticed that when I would speak on the phone, her head would turn towards the phone. We would talk about things that were funny. She would laugh. I mean, Mila would laugh. The doctor said, oh, let's test that. When he visited her, propped her up, tapos gave her a teaspoon of water, and she sipped it. And then the doctor said she's awake. 44 days after her giving birth, um, I took I took her home to this house. It was hard because I brought her home in an ambulance, and she came in a stretcher. And parang at the time I was hoping na we'd go home like a normal couple, with a baby, happy with a baby. But what had happened was that I had to bring home my daughter, of course, ahead of her. Tapos, she had to be brought in here in a stretcher. And I remember, and the maids came out, parang they started wailing kasi they could hardly recognize her. So, we set up a room here, like a hospital room. Yun, I proceeded to trying to get her rehab, trying to get her better.
Sana may kasama ako sa pag-isip, may kasalo sa pagod ng araw ko, may kasama tuwing natatawa, sabay sa sarap na